What a treat we have for you! Our host, Enid Silverman, has designed 38 stained glass windows for 5 Chicagoland synagogues. See her moving, humorous, inspiring presentation of the making of the windows. From finding the windows that look like matzos for the Passover window, to the almost overwhelming responsibility of creating the Holocaust window. Discover the meaning and symbolism of each window, how the windows were actually constructed, and how she complied with the rabbi's interpretation of the second commandment that thou shalt not create graven images. Sit back and enjoy.
Hello everyone, it's so good that you joined us. I'm Enid Silverman and you are watching Artist to Artist. I've been so fortunate as an artist for the last 40 years doing the work I love. Teaching art classes, I have adult painting classes with over 100 students, painting and exhibiting my work, hosting this wonderful show where I've had the great pleasure of interviewing some of the art luminaries like Ed Paschke, Tom Lynch, Blair Kamen, Kalman Shemy, Stanley Tigerman, and many more. Also doing murals and set design. I did all the operating rooms at Children's Memorial Hospital, painted for other places like Apple Tree Theater. But the most rewarding experience of my career was creating 38 stained glass windows for 5 different Chicagoland synagogues. And that's the story I'm going to share with you now. From trying to find stained glass that looked like matzah to creating the overwhelming responsibility of the Holocaust window, and always watching the rabbi's interpretation of the second commandment, thou shalt not create graven images. It all started when, out of the blue, a wonderful gentleman, Herb Dubno, contacted me and said, how would you like to create stained glass windows for my synagogue? Well, I was a Judaic scholar, and I really knew nothing about stained glass, but something within me said, go for it. And so after I thought a little bit, I said, yes, I'd love to. I think I thought, well, the rabbi will tell me what he wants and I'll just draw it up for him. So I met with Rabbi Irv Glickman at AG Beth Israel congregation, and he showed me this wonderful wall and said, we have room for 12 holiday windows. But he said, what windows, which holidays, that's up to you. I would never tell an artist what to do. Well, complete artistic freedom, very exciting, but kind of scary. So I went home and I started studying. First reading the little stories the young children read about all the holidays, and then working my way up to the rabbi's comments on these things. And at one point, finally, after filling the well with information, my ideas and creative energy started flowing out, and I picked up my pencil and I drew the concept for the first window. And that's how I always do. I work the drawing separate from the color. So after I had my drawing perfect with all my research, and then I painted it, deciding which colors to give a wonderful emotional impact in telling this story, I called the rabbi and said, I'm ready to present my first window. I went to the synagogue, and fortunately, in retrospect, I didn't start explaining the symbolism to the rabbi. I stood there quietly, very nervous, and the rabbi looked, and he turned his head up to me and he said, this is beautiful, but can you do it in glass? Oh, yes, yes, I said. More wishful thinking than any knowledge, but I found out, yes, we could do it in glass, just as my brush flowed from dark red to blue. We could find glass that did that. Just as my painting went from dark to light, there was glass that did that. We even found glass that looked like wood and lace, and I'll show you some of that in the window. So then the synagogue hired Barbara Bergworth of Stained Glass and More, and together we made these windows. The first one was such a success that the rabbi called me and said, we have people that want to endow the window, everybody loves it, so start on the second window. Again, I studied, I drew, I painted, I came to the rabbi, I laid it down on his desk. Again, it seemed like forever. He looked, and he finally turned his head up to me and he said, if you're waiting for my approval, you've got it. And that's how this all started, and I'd like to show these windows to you now. This is the Eshet Hayil window. I think you might know the Proverb 31, a woman of valor, who can judge her value? Her price is above the worth of rubies. And it goes on to extol the perfect wife and mother. Now, this is an artist's problem. How do you create these abstract concepts into graphic design? The proverb said, she girdeth her loins with strength. How am I going to paint girdeth loins? Wisdom and humor fall off her tongue. Well, that's the idea. So I decided in this case, because the role of the Jewish mother to light the Shabbos candles. So here she has the Sabbath candles lit as she lights them. And look at the glass we used for her head covering. It certainly resembles lace. Besides lighting the candles, we see the 3 red rubies. That was pretty easy. There's faceted glass. We also have the words Eshet Hayil. We have a memorial candle to represent the soul. At this other side, we have the Shabbat table with the challah, the wine, the flowers, and all around we have the flowers that represent beauty, renewed life, and permanency. This window is 4 feet by 6 feet. It's an interior window, so we had a carpenter and an electrician create it for us. The design of the glass is what I create all by myself. Let's start with the holiday windows. The first one, Rosh Hashanah. Now I have to tell you, the rabbi said complete artistic freedom, but there was one admonition. Because of the second commandment, thou shalt not create graven images. Rabbi Glickman's interpretation of that, and every rabbi has a different interpretation, was no faces. So how am I going to show Rosh Hashanah without faces? Well, I decided I'd have the congregant with the prayer shawl over his head, facing the ark as he blows the shofar. I had seen these wonderful ark doors. They're hand-painted and carved in Eastern Europe, and they have the crown, all the symbolic things, the deer, the lions, the pomegranates. They're just magnificent, so I here created it in glass. Above we have the Shema, the watchwords of our faith, God is one. And down at the bottom, we have the Book of Judgment, because on this holiday, you still have time to be written in the book of life. And this is the companion window, Yom Kippur. Again, it's white, just like Rosh Hashanah, because of the spirituality of the holiday. And it starts with the shin at the top, representing God. Then we have day and night. And then we have the creation of the world. Here we have the birds in the sky, the animals on the land, the fish in the sea, and all of this shows Adam and Eve standing on the scales of justice. Now I will say that there were 2 corrections in this window, in all the windows, which I thought was pretty good, that the rabbi only had 2 things with all the information I gave him that he corrected, and one was Adam and Eve. I had created a naked little Adam and Eve. They had no body parts. They were just like little paper dolls. But he said he understands that, but other rabbis might come in and be offended. So we put some fig leaves on Adam and Eve, and here they stand on the scale of justice. Look at this wonderful glass that created the metallic scales that we wanted. And all this rests on charity, prayer, and repentance. Well, it's easy enough to create charity. Here's an old tzedakah box, a silver antique one. Prayer, a prayer book. But how was I going to do repentance or penitence? Well, I decided on the shofar and the lead lines, if we repent, bring us all the way back to God. Because these were square areas in the synagogue, I decided that each design would have an arch at the top. I thought that's more spiritual. And that gave me areas, in this case, to do the rays from heaven. This was the first window I nervously showed the rabbi. Here we have the sukkot with the 3 stars we can see through the branches and all the fruits hanging. So we have Sukkot, and with the talit spreading beautifully to Simchat Torah. Simchat Torah is a holiday where we come to the end of Deuteronomy and start again with Genesis. And it's celebrated by dancing Torahs. People walk around the synagogue, the children too, with Torahs on their shoulders. So I created that symbolism of the dancing Torahs, and the prayer shawl now becomes a musical staff. At the bottom we have the lulav, the etrog, the myrtle, the willow, and the palm branch. And that was the only other correction the rabbi gave, and he was absolutely right. I had a rather gracefully leaning palm branch swaying in the breeze, and he said, no, just like the etrog has to be with no brown spots, this has to be a perfectly straight palm branch. And so that's what I did. Here we have these wonderful faceted prisms representing the prayers for rain for the harvest. For the Hanukkah window, I created this beautiful menorah, and the base rests on the city of Jerusalem. These stars were etched out of the blue glass, and I'll tell you about that later. Again, we have the arch top, and because I wanted the windows to speak to everyone, not just the most scholarly, but even to children coming in, up in the corner here I have the dreidels that the children spin on this holiday, the coins. Grandpa gives them a quarter or two. And down below, each candle represents the different of the 8 nights of Hanukkah. Here we have the elderly Jews looking in awe, and we have the current tradition of the runner going to Modin with the flame. And look at this bottom. Can you believe that this war showing the Maccabean little Jewish army against the strong Greek army has about 100 pieces of glass in it? And this cell says, Nes Gadol Chai Hashem, meaning a great miracle happened here. It actually is 2 miracles. The fact that 1 cruse of oil burned for 8 days, and that the Maccabeans defeated the stronger Greek army. Now it's the story of Purim. How was I going to create the story of Queen Esther, who saved her people, without having the main characters? But the rabbi said no faces, so I came up with an idea. Because this is a holiday where people dress up in costumes as all these characters, I thought, well, maybe we could put these faces on dowels and make them masks. And Rabbi Learfield, the Rabbi Glickman this was, said, that's a wonderful idea. Okay. So here we have Queen Esther, the mask of her face. We have King Ahasuerus, wicked Haman, Esther's uncle Mordecai. Because this is a wonderful, joyous holiday, I knew there was confetti glass. I had seen it. But when we got to the glass factory, they didn't have any confetti glass in the colors that I depicted here, the pinks and the blues and the purples. But by this time, we were so far into the project that they created this glass for us. We also have the scroll, one-sided, that tells us it's the story of Queen Esther, the story of Purim. And look at this wonderful glass that we were able to find that looks just like wood. So here, amongst all the gaiety, the ribbons, we have the story of wicked Haman being disgraced and having to march Uncle Mordecai through the town on the king's white horse. We also have the groggers that the children have in the synagogue. Every time the rabbi tells this story, they shake those groggers so loudly and stamp their feet so we don't hear Haman's name. And also, up in the corners, we have the typical pastry for Purim, Hamantaschen, sometimes with apricot filling, sometimes with poppy seed filling. And here we have the Passover holiday, starting with all the symbolic foods, the lamb shank, the harosis, roasted egg, etc., 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 the parsley and the horseradish, and the book that tells the story of Passover, the Haggadah. We have the Passover table set with candles, the wine for Elijah, the salt water, and the 3 covered matzahs. Oh boy, there was no glass that we could find in Barbara Bergwerth's studio that resembled matzah. So she said, oh, she'll go to the glass factory and get something. Well, as I came in and watched this window being made, I said, what is that? And she said, that's the glass for matzah. I said, no way. So she said, should I go with you? And she said, no, no, no. She'll take a piece of matzah. And she went there and they said, is that your lunch? And she said, no, I need glass that looks like that. And look at this glass. It really does look like matzah. So now we have the story of Passover, starting with the bondage depicted here by bricks and rope. Then we have, look at this, the face. It's a little skeleton. It's the angel of death going over the homes, but passing over the homes that have red blood on the lintel, the last plague. This all rays out to the opening of the Red Sea. And look at this wonderful glass that we use for water. It exactly recreated what I did with my paintbrush, the greens and the blues, the magentas. And at the top, we have the Torah open scroll to remind us to tell this story to our children. This is my favorite glass. We use it many times. It's always a little different, but when we want sky glass, this recreates very much what I paint for the sky. Well, the rabbi said any holidays I wanted, so I decided besides all the older traditional holidays, I'd have the 2 newer holidays, one of which is Holocaust Day. Wow. How does an artist depict Holocaust Day? How could I do something different than any artist had done before me? How could I make it so meaningful that young children coming into the synagogue would understand it and be influenced by it? So after thinking and studying, and I said, well, I'm going to read the stories of the actual people who were in the camps. And I read the stories left by the artist, how difficult it was to burn little twigs to create something like charcoal, to have the smallest scrap of paper they could find to record what was going on there, what they had seen. And then they would get them out of there or hide them in the bricks. They smuggled them out sometimes with someone. Now it was my turn to tell the story. So I first always go to concept. There's nothing more important in all these windows than having a concept and then depicting it. And my idea here was the shattering of a people. So as if you threw a rock at the middle of this window and created all these shards of glass. But even though it's shattered, it still stands whole. And in these shards, we see the names of the camp: Treblinka, Auschwitz, Chelmno, Dachau, and the barbed wire. The story starts at the bottom. Again in the shards I depicted Kristallnacht, with the destruction of the tablets. the burning of the synagogues, the ruination of the scrolls. I then have the Jews, the lines and lines of Jews, because it was waiting in line, waiting and waiting in line all over, even to the death camps. The screeching boxcars that we're all aware how they were put in there like animals. Here I have them, it might look like Torahs, or my interpretation was the Jews are finally shrouded in prayer cloths, which they didn't have at that burial for them. And above it all is an eternal light. So now they have a memorial candle, and I added the 3 chains so it becomes a memorial eternal light. But when I looked at my design, I said, well, I still want to put in smokestacks. I want to put in ovens. But wherever I try to put it, I would ruin the design, until suddenly it occurred to me that this opening, if I slanted my bottom lines and created bricks at the top, is actually the open oven door. So we're seeing all this through the smoky, dark oven door. Here's Israeli Independence Day, a little happier note. Up at the top, though, we do have the sentries on guard, reminding us of the soldiers who gave their lives to have this day happen, and also that they were attacked that very night of Independence Day. Down below, we have the wonderful Israeli flag blowing in the breeze with the fireworks all around it on this wonderful day, and the musical staff of Hatikva, the national anthem. Then we have the wonderfully abstracted Hora dancers. And I did want to tell you that many of the windows have colors that are symbolic. For instance, here we have the land of milk and honey, the Jerusalem stone, the desert sand, and this all rests on the word Israel, with the branches, the olive branches of peace, echoing the Israeli emblem. The rabbi said I can do whatever holidays I want. Well, gave me a chance to do a beautiful Tiffany-style window, and this is Lag BaOmer. This is when the students weren't allowed to study with the rabbi, so they went to the mountains, supposedly hunting, and that's why I have a bow and arrow in the corner. It also has this beautiful glass and water for the 23rd Psalm. And it's a time that we remember the barley harvest. So we have 7 stalks of barley, because it's 7 weeks between the counting of the Omer and prayers for the barley harvest. Now we have the giving of the tablets. Well, if you're doing it in glass that's going to last for centuries, what color were those tablets? Would you know that in all my studies I found out they were sapphire blue? The next step was to go to the jeweler and see what color sapphire blue was. So here we have sapphire blue tablets with the 10 Commandments etched in the glass, all given on Mount Sinai amid fire, smoke, and thunder. But now this holiday is also remembered by the fruits, and the children take fruit baskets on their shoulders and dance through the town. So here we have the fruit with the peace dove, a shofar, and wheat, and the beautiful almond flowers from the almond trees in Israel. And now from the Book of Lamentations, Tisha B'Av. That's when the first synagogues were burned and the second one burned. So here we have the fire and all that. The prisms here represent our teardrops for this sad occasion, and all that's left is the remaining wall in Israel, the Wailing Wall. So here we have our city and our people praying. How do I do the holidays without the Sabbath window? But how am I going to show the personification of the Sabbath, the Shabbat bride, without a face? Well, I decided I could have these wonderful rays coming out of her, and that we won't miss the face. Also, I have the mother lighting the candles with her hands over her face, as the little daughter is doing, lighting the Shabbat candles. The Shabbat table with the challah and wine. Here we have the father in the synagogue, so he's facing the Torahs. This all rests on the word Shabbat Shalom, covered with the turtle doves. Shabbat Shalom, and again by the still waters. I think it's so fascinating how these windows are made, so let me show it to you. This little tiny window, one of the smallest windows I've ever created, was done for Lincolnwood Jewish congregation, and it was one of the 12 months of the year. So from my drawing, right here, and my colored rendition of it, Barbara Bergworth projects my drawing exactly to scale, this drawing is to scale, projects it on a wall, and makes it the actual size of the window, which you're seeing here. Look at how many pieces of glass are in this window. There's over 300 pieces of glass. Look at the ones in the grapes. Every one is numbered. That number refers to we made a plan ahead of time, picking all the glass. We made a plan which colored glass goes to which number. Then this pattern is placed on cardboard and laid on a long table. So now it's a matter of making this pattern into glass. Every piece of glass is cut with a glass cutter, so it creates a fault. Those pieces are all then placed according to this pattern on this table. It's like creating a giant jigsaw puzzle out of glass. And it's so exciting to see it develop. My concept now being created. So each piece is laid on the table in its proper place. Each piece, over 300 for this little tiny window, is laid in place. When all the pieces are in place on the table, and there's this wonderful glass picture, each piece is picked up, wrapped with copper foil, copper wire. It looks like a long roll of wire, but each one has copper wire put around the edges and placed back down on the table. Where the copper wire from one meets the other creates a little well, and with a 750-degree soldering iron, and the solder's not all lead and part tin, this well is filled with the solder, and that's what holds this window together for hundreds of years. This is the Tiffany style of making a window. Sometimes I ask myself, why do I do this? Why do I work till 2 in the morning trying to meet the deadline for one of the windows? Why do I nervously worry about, will the rabbi like it? Or sometimes it's the committee that has to approve it, or the sisterhood. And then I remember when that Eshet Heil window was dedicated. And here we were at Lincolnwood Jewish congregation, and all the congregants were gathered in the lobby where it hangs. And it was covered by a sheet, and it's an interior window. And at one moment, after the rabbi made a beautiful introduction, they pulled down the sheet, and there was a gasp from all the people. And in a second later, bingo, the light went on. And you know, some people started to cry. So it's times like that that I say, how could I not do it? And then I get to share this story with you. Thank you so much for joining us for Artist to Artist. I'm Enid Silverman, and we'll hope to see you next time for another talk about art.